I saw that your journey actually is, spans across different continents because you have been from Berlin to Singapore to Shanghai, and your work also touches on some of the most innovative visual effects that we know of immersive media projects worldwide. So, could you share actually what initially sparked your passion for media art and how these, your diverse experiences have shaped then your approach and, also for storytelling, but also for true technology?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, that's true. It's quite a journey. So I started actually even before I went to film school. I worked already as a camera man, cinematographer for a TV station, and I went to film school, and I really want to become a cinematographer for feature films. But then was bitten by the animation bug, and I kind of like fell in love with more experimental approaches. So I was not so interested in recreating perfectly realistic things like spaceships or buildings, etc. The stuff which was needed for visual effects, right? But I was more fascinated by the technological possibilities back then. So we were really lucky at this film school. In the early 90s, we had some fantastic equipment, and that enabled me to really explore and experiment. And then I did some experiments already back then with a self-built 360-degree camera because I worked on an European union-funded research project which allowed us to map video on a 3D object and in real time, and it was streamed over the internet. So we thought like, oh wow, so we can just like basically have a panoramic video on a cylinder or half sphere or something, and then see that live on the internet in a web browser. So we did that. So we shot, but you could not buy a 360 camera back then. There was no commercial available 360 camera. So we basically just like, started the very first one was we just used a big soup spoon and filmed with the camera into the soup spoon. And then we had like a very good mirror ball. And then we went to a lab and they built us one really good mirror ball, but we shot with one camera into the mirror ball. So we didn't have like an array of many cameras. And with that, I really, that was basically the beginning where I really started some interest in, immersive media. Um, I was very extremely experimental, of course, back then, very experimental. And then after film school, I just started working first in a lot of shorter projects, TV commercials, and things like that, and then some European feature films, Roman Polanski and Wim Wenders, visual effects for that. And that was the time in the early 2000s when the visual effects work became a lot more international. So some of my friends already went to Australia at that time or to London. And I decided I go to Singapore for in 2003. And it was a very small studio. We did a lot of commercial work again, which kind of was okay, but unfortunately the timing was not really good because that was the very first Hong Kong SARS epidemic, and all the international clients didn't come to Singapore. So, and then I went back in 2004, which turned out to be really good because that was really the time in the mid 2000s when there suddenly international visual effects projects came to Germany. And I basically worked my way up in the visual effects scene from visual effects artist to senior visual effects artist and leading a small team, supervising on set. And eventually, at one point, I was leading the entire team in Shanghai for Pixelmondo. And at the beginning, the first project which brought me there to Shanghai was again, an sort of immersive project for General Motors for the World Exhibition. They produced one film for like an insanely large screen, like 30 meters long screen, and you were sitting in like this 4D cinema, like a screen, like the ratio was like I think 10 by 1 or something. So very, very wide screen.
Wow.
And that was extremely challenging. And, that was like really, I don't know, almost like an adventure producing this film. And I came there, and then I think in 3 months later, we were already 50 people. We started with like three people, and then 3 months later, we were 50 in the team. So the team really, the company really exploded. And because we did a really good job, and at the same time, the company Pixelmondo opened more and more offices around the world, and then they got bigger projects, like of course, as you know, Game of Thrones, and then Hugo and Star Trek, Oblivion, and so on. But there were also a couple of smaller ones before that, like Sucker Punch, and not super proud of these ones, but yeah, we worked also on this kind of projects, so more and more international projects. And because we already had the entire team there from in all departments, very good, artists for matte paintings, for background paintings, for 3D modeling, for animation. We were not degraded to a team just to do technical things. We were really capable of doing entire sequences. So, for example, for Star Trek, we did the entire sequence where the spaceship breaks apart, and not only like, oh, you guys do the 3D modeling. We did everything from beginning to the end. Then also for Hugo, we did everything that happens in the clock tower, in the train station tower, everything in there, and also helped on the big shot and the opening shot and in all the trains, etc. So that was a lot of work, a very, very rewarding in a way,
Yeah.
to finally after the 2000s. I'm not sure how it was in Italy, but in Germany, the private TV stations, they were interested in using the visual effects for disaster movies like tornado, earthquake, tsunami, and all of that, right? And yes, we were also excited to use our visual effects craft to do that, but the movies were not very good, right? So they're very simple stories. And then finally, I felt, in 2010, 2012, Thrones, that was kind of like finally I came to a point where like, oh, okay, now this is a good use of my craft of doing visual effects after many, many years of maybe chaos, destruction, but questionable quality in story time. So I'll continue the story. You can, of course, interrupt me anytime, but at the same time, the entire visual effects industry went a little bit through a dark valley, like 2012. We finished the season 2 for Game of Thrones. And some of the lead facility for that was Stuttgart. My good friend Yuri Stanosek, he was in charge of the entire production. And then, the philosophy of the company was every studio is like 50 people, and does a lot of, gets work and finishes that sequence. And then LA was in charge of Hugo. So Ben Grossman, the supervisor, was sitting there. And he also later supervised Star Trek, and already trusted us. And that was all great. In 2012, we received the Oscar for best visual effects for Hugo, and of course Game of Thrones received so many awards from Primetime Emmy to Visual Effects Society, etc., etc. So that was very rewarding in this year. But at the same time, the entire visual effects industry went through a very hard crunch because of the financials, right? So many studios were only doing this fixed price budgeting, and then you have so many changes, and at the end of the day, it's very hard to make some money. And you maybe probably remember in 2013, right? Life of Pi
Yeah.
received the visual effects Oscar, but Rhythm and Huey was already bankrupt because everything was possible at that time. We could achieve everything, yeah, but at what cost, right? So we could make it so realistic, but the resources were still very extreme. So we were kind of proud that we could finally achieve it, but financially it was a disaster, so to say.
Wow.
And yeah,
No, I
it
couldn't
was very
imagine
hard.
that
But
actually. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, luckily, I mean, I left in 2013, so the university was already chasing me for a couple of years to join there, and then I thought like, okay, now is the time. I really need to try something new, and they wanted to build a visual effects stream inside the animation department. And I thought like, yeah, that sounds good. But many of my basically most of my colleagues and friends, they stayed, and they were actually, after the deep dark valley came, the glorious time of all the streaming services, Netflix, Prime, Apple, blah blah blah, and they all needed to produce so much content. So suddenly it was the opposite for the visual effects industry. They couldn't find enough people, and they were also making good money. So
Okay.
there were some good years. And then came, of course, the writer's strike, COVID and the writer's strike. So now it's looking not so rosy again, but there were a couple of really, really good years in the mid 2010s, I would say, and before COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I went to Singapore again, which I already knew is easy to live as a European is not very challenging, not as challenging as China or Shanghai, which was absolutely fantastic to live in Shanghai. But Singapore is very easy, so everyone speaks English, and it's very is a mix of Asian and Western influences. And yeah, now I'm already 12 years at the university, and I figured at one point like, okay, so now I can, go back to what I'm actually was fascinated when I was a student, and that is immersive media. So I started, my first project was actually a dome project, so a full dome project for a Fellini exhibition where Federico was involved, and he brought all the Fellini original drawings on napkins, etc., to Singapore, and we had like a big exhibition, and I made like one animated short film for that exhibition, which was
Oh,
screened in
cool.
this full dome. And then I thought like, wait, now I already made that film, so I have to do it for the headset as well. And then I realized that was exactly the time, when so many things happened in terms of technological development. So, 2016 was the year of the room scale VR headsets. So HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, PlayStation VR were all released in 2016. So suddenly these headsets were accessible for, not only super secret research labs, but everyone could simply buy it. They were not cheap. They were, you still had to put $2,000 on the table, but you could finally get them, and that opened so many new possibilities to create immersive experiences. And of course there are like two things, right? The one is the 360, where you cannot walk around. You either animate it and then you have a camera in the 3D scene, or you shoot it with a 360 camera, and then it's often more a linear storytelling. or the room scale VR. So this part we call cinematic virtual reality, and the other part we call room scale VR, where we build the entire world in 3D, and then you can walk in.
Oh,
And at that point, I thought like, wait, I mean, there must be some crossover to so that we produce basically walk-in movies, so that we can like basically step inside a movie a little bit and be part, maybe it's like, of course there's a crossover to computer games as well, right? Where you're an actor in that environment. And that brought me to, I don't know if you saw that on my website. I have like, I started, so I did a couple of VR projects, but the one I'm really kind of proud of is the project which I would call cinematic virtual heritage. So I do a lot of virtual heritage projects, but this is quite unique because I found this film which was super influential in Singapore and Malaysia, based on an old vampire stories from a long time ago, and then in the 50s, a Singapore studio produced a black and white horror movie called The Pontianak. Yeah. And that was such a success. There were, the effects were so basic, unbelievable, right? They just like dissolved from one image to the other, but the people were freaking out in the cinema. So it was a huge thing. And it was so successful that they immediately produced a second. Just 8 months later, they had the part two already in the cinema, and then another 12 months later, part three. And the second big studio in Singapore also produced three Pontianak films. So it was a craze almost, right? A cultural phenomenon. And the unbelievable thing is, the first and the second film, which started this craze, are completely gone. There's no trace of these films. They're considered lost, right?
oh,
And I thought like, wow, this is unbelievable. I have to, create an virtual reality homage to this film to bring at least a scene back to life, as not recreating it one to one. I can't, because we don't have that film, right?
original.
But at least I can create like an VR experience as an homage to this lost film. So, and then we rebuilt the entire village in 3D, and then created the characters and recreated some key elements, key moments of that lost films, which we it took us a year just to find a description, an accurate description of that film in some archives in Kuala Lumpur. One collector had like one promotional booklet from 1957. And from this, we stitched together like, oh wow, that was the key moment which freaked out the people in the cinema. And yeah, so that's how this project started. And there is, of course, the way, like, of course, I approach these projects with my experience from, working on high-end visual effects, et cetera, et cetera. So I have obviously to some degree a pretty high expectation of like the visual fidelity, visual quality. But I know that's not all, right? I expect that from myself. So the visual quality is important, but these projects, they of course want something more. They want to experiment with like, how can I immerse the audience in a story or in an environment, or maybe just a scene or something. So yeah, so that is one of my projects I worked on recently. There's a bunch of other, projects I also did. I still do a little bit visual effects work here and there, but to be honest, my focus now is more on these immersive projects for, and like, I mean, yeah, Game of Thrones and all of that. That it's I know the names are big, right? But it's already 12, 13 years ago, right? So yeah, yeah. So yeah, I know. Yeah, it's good.
And actually,
Still,
what do
yeah.
you hope for, like working on a project like you said lately? What do you imagine it will be like 10 years from now? do you think like the cinema would be like a totally different, experience to share, or it's still like so near and it will take more years to see something like you said, like that one person or more than one person can share, like living inside a movie. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's $1 million question, right? So I don't know. I just like follow a little bit my instinct and my vision. And to be honest, I've started this project with the idea like, wow, we need this walk-in movie. And then the first few tests, uh, actually my idea completely failed because we were in the scene, but the actors were walking around, and you as part of the scene were so busy just like with the navigation and following and going around, etc., that you couldn't really focus on the story. So sometimes that's why I'm a researcher now, right? So I have an idea, then I try it out, and I can also come to the conclusion like, no, that's not it. I need a different approach, right? So this is not working, right? In the bigger picture, I think for we're all waiting for some magic moment where this immersive media, either augmented reality or virtual reality, has some breakthrough moment for like more commercial. I mean, obviously the last big push was from Mark Zuckerberg with his metaverse thing, right? Which no one bought. The metaverse is empty. No one's going there. It's a deserted place, and there
Yeah,
is already an existing world VR chat, which is super popular. And the idea of Mark was, I can fully understand it. I'm not going to use his stupid metaverse, but the meeting people in a VR space and maybe playing together, or even what they promoted, looking at a concert together, etc. I fully understood what he was talking about, because I play VR mini golf with my friend in Berlin while I sit in Singapore, and we meet like every other Sunday, and we just like walk through this very pixelated landscape.
wow.
It's not photorealistic at all. It's the design language is so consistent that for us it's believable, and I spend quality time with him there, and it's more quality time than having a Zoom meeting. Yeah, so I feel like I really spend time with him. Okay, so we play mini golf, and I just see his head and his racket, and the lips are moving from the voice. I hear him, of course, and so yes, that can work. Instead of video, we or now with Apple Vision, they try to sell the same thing. But I mean, if your headset is 3,000 or whatever euro, who's going to buy that? That's just like some crazy researchers who can afford that, right?
Yeah,
So in terms of the idea, I totally understand what these companies and Mark Zuckerberg, etc., are selling, because I experienced it. I know how strong this feeling is to be in VR, and I can spend 4 hours with my friend in mini golf. 4 hours, or normally we do like 2 hours or 3 hours, but sometimes we even spend 4 hours, right, in VR, and just like talking, walking around in this pixelated park, and it works. It works. But um, yeah, I don't know, why do we need that? Why do we need that? Why do we need that? I benefit from it because I want to be with my friend in Berlin, right? And then we benefit from it. But That's a very, that's one use case. Yeah, of course, like kind of a little bit like what Facebook was maybe also for people staying in touch or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But people hate the headset. People don't like the interface. It's too heavy. It's too clunky. They're annoyed. They get dizzy, etc., etc. So 50% of the people just absolutely just hate the VR headset. So I don't mind, but I also don't blame them if they hate it, right? So we all know that's not it yet, right? Okay, but still, I produce content for it. I experiment with it because for me it's super fascinating to be in this world, immersed in this world. Yeah. And I haven't done any AR projects yet, but I probably should experiment with that at one point. Right now, I'm still focusing really on VR projects. Yeah.
And since you mentioned that, I was curious about one thing. Actually, you have made like so many projects that are related to fantasy worlds, so like, sci-fi and stuff. So I would like to ask you if you are also fascinated by this genre and, like also working with such talents as you mentioned before, so Wim Wenders, Roman Polanski, J.J. Abrams. Did they actually have an influence on you like creatively, like in a creative way, and also maybe technically because they wanted you to do some specific things? I don't know, like, can you share how the process works, like some behind the scenes, like when you're working with a director and you have to decide to put um, all your knowing in what you are doing actually and what you want that scene to look like? How does it work?
Okay, so I mean, in the visual effects, people generally understand themselves as like um, we have to communicate as close as possible with the director to understand their vision, and then pre-visualize it. So there are so many steps, right? You start with concept art, and then you make sketches and build environments and the visual effects understand themselves as like, yeah, we're here to bring the director's vision to life, right? So the normally the vision would come from the director, but of course, because it's so big, these projects are so big, so it's also a lot of people are talking. Yeah, it's not only the director, right? It's the entire art department. It's the visual effects designers, etc., right? Everyone's throwing ideas in, and at the end of the day there are like so many people put in their ideas, um, and then the director's job is often like to push the people in one direction, and then they start running and build some stuff, and then the director and all the supervisors like me in between, we look at it and say like, is that what the director wanted? Let me try something else. And then we show maybe different, artworks, and then the director says like, yeah, 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 that one, or do a mix of this one and this one. That's the classic answer, right? Like, oh, I like two and three. Can you make a mix of two and three? And then so it's like a little. It's like a tree in a way, right? It's like so many crossroads with so many uh, possibilities, and it also happens sometimes that you have to go like two steps back and then go in this direction, right? So you never throw anything away because you might need to come back to an original version where your instinct was actually right. So I think that is maybe also important. There are some some moments where this can also be quite exhausting,
Yeah.
to be honest, because in this bigger project, so many people are, putting compared to a smaller project where, I mean, there are now, for example, the best example was, I think, the last visual effects Oscar, right, was the small Japanese team with the Godzilla -1, which was like a super small team where the director was sitting directly together with the visual effects team, right? And that's the shortest communication. So if the director, but that's in these big Hollywood projects, that's barely the case, right? There are like so many layers of communication. Everyone's communicating through a database, right? So face-to-face communication is very rare. Everything is you're not writing emails. Everything is centralized in one huge, communication database. So everything is attached to that, and blah 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 blah. So it's yeah, has to be like that because these shots, these shows, like the big visual effects projects, they have thousands of visual effects shots, of course, and then one company is maybe working on 500 shots and the other company is working on 500 shots, and to keep track of all of that, of course, without a database, you would go crazy. You cannot do that by just writing some emails or something. But there are exactly like the opposite cases, right? And that's why we're in a way, I'm a little bit jealous of these guys that they can work so direct and so direct communication, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And you,
but generally,
okay.
as I said, like basically the director has a vision. The visual effects supervisor is trying to understand that, then brief his art department. They make suggestions. Their own ideas come in there. That's why they're also artists. And then in communication with the supervisor. Then they propose something to the director, and then the director, gives feedback, and so on and so on and so on, and that can go on for forever. That can go on for many months. That process,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And we have the last 5 minutes, so I would like to
Okay. Yeah.
to ask you if you have, when you remember your work, your career, are there like some other works you are or scenes that you find out at the end and you said it were very rewarding for you, like because it's a vision that you had, or because you achieved the the idea that you wanted to give in that particular moment.
Okay. Wow. I mean, yeah, as I said, now I'm already a couple of years out of that game, but I think um, there were moments in each of these projects, from Hugo and Star Trek, in all of these shows there were moments where we were really like proud of, because we threw in an idea and the director loved it, for example, right? So this is the classical reward moment, right? Where you think like, hey, maybe I'll suggest something completely different, right? And then it's accepted, right? So it makes it into the film. So that's great. I remember one project where that was not for a feature film. It was like the entire packaging of a huge, mega big Chinese TV show, some talent show, like the biggest X Factor, blah blah blah, whatever. And we were working on this opening sequence, and once we were done, I looked at it and said, like, yeah, that's exactly what we planned, but I don't like it. And everyone looked at me and said, like, what are you talking about? We did exactly what you wanted. And I said, like, I know, yeah, it's exactly what we wanted, right? And then they all went for lunch, and I just used some uh, s- I basically just like put it into an editing software and started randomizing stuff around, like just like complete chaos. I basically destroyed my own project, yeah, by chopping it up and completely rearranging everything. And the TV station loved it, yeah, and I also loved it, and I thought like, wow, okay, that I learned something from that. That sometimes at the end of the process, you still have to have the strengths to say like. Um, I spend so much work, time and effort into this thing, but it's not right. It's not right. I still have to change something. It's also important to come to an end and say like, that's enough. That's good enough for this shot, right? So this is the challenge. Often I also experience with my students. They either are satisfied too early, or they never satisfied, right? So I mean, this is a life question for everything, right? So it's the same thing for everything in life. But I learned something in that moment where I said like, wow, how brutal, right? How brutal. We work, weeks, a month or something, and then in one hour I destroyed everything and liked it better. So
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I for me it was a very strong feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's about to, I thought we would talk less, but actually I can stay like all the afternoon talking with you. So, like, thank you so
yeah.
much really for your time.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah,
And
of
also,
course,
I think maybe I will ask you something more via email when you have time, because, it's very
of
interesting
course, of
what I
course. Yeah.
discovered today. And yeah, I mean, for me,
Today is the award ceremony. Like
yeah,
today
yeah,
we give the award
I'm
at
a
the
big fan
river
actually.
festival.
It's
Yeah.
it's amazing to see, what uh you bring just your imagination on the table, but you can make it real. So like it's fantastic because seeing
Yeah.
all your works, even when I was little, because you go, I think I was, I think like 17 or something. So like,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
And
so
you saw it back
yeah,
then, or
yeah,
you
yeah.
saw it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
one of,
Very good.
the
Very
memories
good.
that I have. So like it's very, very
Yeah.
interesting to see and to know actually how all this process is born, because we know very little. Actually, people that are not into the technical side of it don't know how all this is created. So thank you so much for sharing, like your
Yeah. Yeah.
story.
I mean, on my website, of course, I'm not really updating it so often, but this is only a selection, of course, of the projects. I had to compile a long list of all the projects I ever worked on for my university. And then after 130 projects, I stopped listing them. I thought now it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's like the website is like, I don't know, a fraction of the projects, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, I already have a job, so
thank
I
you
don't,
so much.
yeah.
Really, really. Thank you so much. All the
Yeah,
best.
yeah,
I will
okay.
write you for the
Sure.
interview when it's published.